the best place to work. My current focus is on Bucket List, which is a rewards and recognition platform helping to build some of the best cultures on planet Earth. Co-presenting with me here today is Debbie Permain. She has over 20 years experience in leadership development, developing workplace culture and high-performing teams. She's worked at Global Knowledge, Chappelle, FGI, and Accenture. We're excited to share our findings with you today, and we have an absolutely action-packed agenda. So, we're going to be talking about what is engagement and how can it benefit your business. We're going to be talking about why it's critical to do employee engagement surveys. We're going to talk about some of the most common mistakes you should avoid. Debbie has some amazing stories around that. And we have some really good examples and hopefully actionable ideas that you can implement today to begin improving your business. At the very end, we also have a few special offers that we've never offered before that we think you'll be interested in. So, in a few moments, we're going to share some really great stats around what employee engagement really is, but I wanted to start off with a quick story that really speaks to the power of what an engaged employee does. So, in some cases, employees will literally go to the ends of the earth to help a company succeed in its mission. There's one business consultant by the name of Peter Shankman who was getting ready to board a flight that was the last leg of a really long day of travel. His flight was near dinner time, and he knew he'd be starving when he deplaned and headed home. So he jokingly tweeted, "Hey Mortons, can you please meet me at Newark Airport with the porterhouse when I land in 2 hours? Okay, thanks." So that was a joke. It was very facetiously done. So you can imagine his surprise when he got off the plane to find a tuxedo gentleman holding a bag that contained a 24-ounce Morton's porterhouse, shrimp, potatoes, bread napkins, and silverware. What's fascinating about this is that this tweet had to be noticed. Somebody actually had to get approval to go out and meet Peter. A cook had to make the food. The nearest Morton's was 23.5 miles away from the airport, so somebody actually had to take the time to drive to the airport. They had to find his flight, they had to hunt him down and give him the steak and his entire meal. So I think this is just an amazing example of what an engaged employee and an engaged team is willing to do. And I think we could all use a few more stories like this inside of our workplace. So, I'm a huge fan of the entrepreneur, Richard Branson. For those of you who don't know, he's the founder of the Virgin Group. They have over 17,000 employees and almost $20 billion in revenue. And Branson says that if you take care of your people, they'll take care of your business. What's really interesting is that it's not just Branson who says this. There's a study released by the Virgin Group saying that employee engagement has become a top priority for CEOs around the world in 2017. And next up, Debbie will walk us through that in a little more detail.
A lot of the clients that I work with ask me, how do I know if my employees are engaged or not? And so I think it's important we start off just with a clear definition of what an engaged employee does. So engaged employees are someone who are positive. They're positive when they speak about you. They're positive when they speak about the business. They have job satisfaction. They like the work that they do. They're motivated and committed to achieve goals. They live your company values on a day-to-day basis in the way they behave, in the way they treat your clients, your customers, their coworkers. And they're also accountable for their own results. So the first question I want you guys to think about is, how many of you can honestly describe every one of your employees in this way? We also need to really understand why this topic of engagement matters. Engagement was the top takeaway for CEOs from the 2016 Talent Management Summit. We know that engagement is the #1 predictor of external customer satisfaction. Also, 94% of companies on the Hay Group's World's Most Admired Companies list say that employee engagement is actually what they believe increases their competitive advantage. There's also a great organizational consultant. I love his work. His name's Dave Ulrich, and his work is called Victory in Organizations. His research shows that culture, systems, and processes actually have a 4 times impact on business performance. What are some of the hard facts? You can see them up here on the screen. When your employees are engaged, for every dollar your business spends, you'll actually see a $3 return on that investment. Versus disengaged employees, you get a 25-cent return on your dollar. Engaged employees bring in an increase of 147% in earnings per share, and also an 87% increase in retention. And I think that that's really critical right now as we're starting to encounter in a lot of industries a labor shortage. It's really critical that you're building cultures that help you to retain your most talented individuals. So if those stats don't say enough to you, I think it's also important for you. Motivation theory tells us that in order for you to buy into caring about improving your employee engagement, you also have to believe that there are benefits to you. The other side of employee engagement and motivation says that you have to believe that there are consequences for you. So let's first take a look at some of the benefits of employee engagement. If you want to see an increase in productivity, work quality, overall motivation, teamwork, commitment, attendance, retention, performance, then it would be worthwhile for you to invest in improving your employee engagement. The opposite of that would be the cost of disengagement. So if you're trying to avoid things like turnover, if you're dealing with constant issues of absenteeism or safety, if you have conflict on your team, if you're experiencing high degrees of stress, long-term disability issues, a real issue that's coming up now is something called presenteeism, where people are just showing up for a paycheck. Also, mistakes that are really costly to your business. So these are some of the costs that you'll incur with disengagement. As we were preparing for this webinar, one of the things Jason and I were talking about is that for us, regularly doing annual culture reviews just makes good business sense. You know, we do things like monthly safety inspections, we do performance reviews once a year. Why wouldn't we invest in doing a culture review with our employees on an annual basis? Being proactive and identifying culture weaknesses just makes good sense. Most issues that I actually get asked to consult with to companies could easily have been avoided or addressed in a much less costly or time-consuming manner if they had been proactively identified sooner. So some of you might be thinking at this point, okay, Debbie, this all sounds great, so tell me what the engagement drivers are. If I want to develop a more engaged workforce, what do I need to do? The Hay Group actually has identified 12 key engagement drivers, and you see them listed up here on the screen. In our case study examples, we're going to actually highlight the first 6 of these because these tend to be the ones that have the greatest return on your investment. So training and development, vision and values, appreciation, recognition, teamwork, honest, open communication, and leadership. We also then have things like the physical work environment, whether people have autonomy, feel a sense of purpose in their job, whether people feel healthy and safe coming to work, compensation and benefits, social responsibility, and work-life balance. So now let's get to some of the good stuff. One of the things I want to do is share with you, over my 20 years in consulting with companies around employee engagement, I repeatedly seem to run into people doing the same mistakes over and over again. So I just want to share with you what some of those mistakes are. I think the number one mistake that I hear repeatedly is when I meet with managers, they tell me that they believe they have a good pulse on the culture. They tell me that they're approachable. They tell me that employees, tell them things honestly. And I do believe that they honestly believe that that's true. One of the most important things, though, that people are not considering is something that I learned way back in school when I was studying psychology. And this goes back to something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And in Maslow, we learn that in order for people to have what is called psychological safety, they really need to feel safe to be able to be open and honest and authentic. And let's just be really honest. When you are paying someone to do a job, and you're their manager or their boss. There is a degree of psychological safety that does not exist. So I just want to highlight for you an example of that. When I was working in a company in HR, we all the time through HR did our own internal employee engagement surveys. So we conducted the survey, we promised confidentiality, and then we managed how the results got distributed to managers. When I first joined the company, I sort of challenged the VP at the time. We talked a lot about Maslow and the need for psychological safety. And I said, let's just see what would happen if we actually paid an outside third party to do our employee engagement survey next year. Let's just see if really people are feeling that they can be open and honest and safe. And do you know that we actually ended up seeing an average of 12 to 28% of a difference in questions and engagement categories on the survey that was conducted by the outside confidential third party. So I think believing that you have a good pulse on your culture is not necessarily the best thing for you to believe. The other thing I want to highlight, so you see here about not sharing results with employees or not involving employees in action planning. And I'm just going to share a story with you about a time when I worked for a company and I was asked to go and do an employee survey for one of our divisions who we had heard some rumblings through the HR channel that they were actually looking to become unionized. They were very disgruntled. There were lots of issues of safety, absenteeism, turnover, and so I was asked to go up and find out what exactly was going on. So I set up a meeting, handed out the surveys. This was back in the day of paper-based surveys, and as the survey started to commence, I basically had about half the room get up and walk out and throw the surveys in the garbage. One gentleman actually ripped his survey up and threw it in my lap and muttered a few things under his breath as he walked out. So you can imagine right away, I was all bright-eyed HR person thinking, what is going on here? I called my boss. I said, we need to stay here for another week. And I actually ended up sitting down one-on-one with each employee in that division for a half hour over the next couple of days. And when I ended up hearing over and over and over again is just how frustrated, how the lack of trust that they had for management, because we had been doing surveys for a number of years and the employees had never seen the results of the survey. Not only that, but the same issues just continued to fester year after year after year. So clearly, management in that division was not committed to action planning or making changes. There was nothing that had changed as a result of them giving this honest feedback, and quite frankly, they were just fed up. So, you know, my job was to turn that around, and I'll tell you, it took me 2 years to do that. I ended up, promising to them that we'd share the results of the survey. We actually involved employees in committees to help look at some of the issues that they had addressed so that they could make recommendations. And I'm happy to say that within 2 years, the average score on the engagement survey increased by as much as 24%. I also want to highlight this thing about believing HR owns engagement. So often I feel, being in the HR seat, that CEOs say to me, Debbie, you're in charge of engagement, do it, make it happen. I'm just going to remind everyone on this call today that Accenture actually does these kind of surveys all the time, and their recent survey said that managers and leaders actually are the ones who have an 80% impact on employee engagement, not HR. Another story around low engagement and ignoring it is simply just to say, one of the clients I consult with asked me to come in after a 24% decrease over 1 year in their division's engagement scores. I met with each individual employee again for half an hour and found out that that decrease had actually come down to one person on the team. And when I met with each person one-on-one on the team to find out exactly what was going on, they repeatedly told me their frustration, their lack of trust, and just the lack of respect that they had for the manager of that division, because that person wasn't dealing or addressing the issue of this one employee. So I think it's really important that we don't ignore signs of low engagement. And that team was experiencing all kinds of signs for a period of time, and the manager just looked the other way and chose to ignore it. It ended up having a huge impact. I think 4 people left in a 6-month period of time. And as I said, their engagement scores decreased by 24%. So how do we actually go about looking at some great engagement stories? I want to share with you one company that I've had the pleasure of working with. Their name is TELUS. I've worked with them through Global Knowledge. Those of you who don't know TELUS, they're one of the largest telecom companies in Canada. And actually, the Hay Group identified them as being one of the best employers to work for in Canada. And I believe the reason why this is because they are completely committed to developing their leadership, and they have what I would call a training and development culture. So what exactly does TELUS do? First of all, every department has annual training budgets, and during annual performance reviews, employees are engaged in discussion around what training they feel they need in order for them to be more successful in their jobs. They're also engaged in conversation around what their career goals and aspirations are. And then the company goes so far as to actually hook them up with mentors who can help them navigate their career development. TELUS also identifies emerging leaders before leadership positions become available. So they put who they call high potential employees or emerging leaders through training programs on leadership competencies, so that when positions become available, they're able to pull from internal employees and help to advance them in their career aspirations, putting them in leadership positions. Every year, the Learning and Development team at TELUS also identifies the core competencies that are critical for leaders to have in order for them to be able to lead the business successfully. And they then provide leaders with training. And each year, they revisit what those competencies are because they do change from year to year. Directors and executives also go through leadership education through local universities. And a recent thing that TELUS did, which I think is just amazing, is they've actually offered through managers who are nominated to actually do their MBA. So on an annual basis, they'll pay for high-performing managers, 20 of them, to actually complete an MBA. What kind of training options do they offer? Everything from online courses, lunch and learns, half-day sessions, full-day sessions. And the topics are a whole host of people management and leadership development competencies. So topics like emotional intelligence, effective communication, performance management, coaching, how to have difficult conversations, problem solving, customer service excellence, leading change, motivation, delegation, managing multiple priorities, innovation, conflict management. I could actually keep going on and on. So they really ensure that their employees have access to learning and development opportunities. Now, you may not have deep pockets like TELUS when it comes to things like leadership training and development, but my hope is that you'll even just be able to take away a couple of the ideas that I've shared about things that they do to actually encourage leadership development and help keep employees engaged through training and development. And actually last year on the Hay Group survey, they determined that Canadian employers, that employees in Canada are only 52% satisfied with the training and development that they receive from their employer. So even just investing a little bit in this area, I think can make a huge impact to your engagement. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jason, and he's going to continue on telling you some great stories.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much, Debbie. I wish somebody had invested that much into my own leadership and training over the careers of years. I was thinking I could use, conflict resolution, leadership training, difficult conversations. That's some amazing leadership training that they're investing. So next up, let's talk about Google. It's a brand I'm sure we're all familiar with. What you may not know is Google has over 72,000 employees, and they did almost $90 billion in revenue in 2016. So a big company. They're also rated as the #1 workplace to work by Fortune magazine in 2017. So Google is an amazing organization with many admirable qualities, but I wanted to share one story around their focus on teamwork and open and honest communication. So Google recently did a pretty intensive study called Project Aristotle. So over 2 years, they did 200 plus interviews with over 180 Google teams. And the big question they asked is, what makes a great team? And while you're on this webinar, I want everybody to ask themselves that, what makes a great team? So internally, Google had made the assumption that it was all about assembling the right people together. So for example, you take one Rhodes Scholar, maybe a couple of extroverts, a PhD student, a rock star software engineer, and boom, you have an amazing team. It turns out that that is not the case. So who is on a team matters far less than how the team members interact. So if I was to elaborate on that a little bit, Google learned that there are 5 key dynamics that set a successful team apart from other teams. The 5 qualities include psychological safety, dependability, structure and clarity, meaning of work, and impact of work. But by far and away, the most important one was psychological safety. So to define that, or to illustrate that point, I'd love to share a little story about a guy named Matt Sakaguchi. So Matt was a team lead at Google, and he was participating in Project Aristotle because he knew his team could be performing better. Matt actually went ahead and surveyed his team and found out that not all his team members felt psychologically safe. So to help his team get unstuck, Matt booked an offsite to meet with everyone from within his team. And at the start of that offsite, Matt started off by telling all his teammates that he had stage 4 cancer, which was untreatable. He had been working with his team for 10 months, and nobody knew this. But by this brave admission, Matt demonstrated to his team that it was okay to be vulnerable and take risks in front of one another. So the rest of the team started opening up and sharing what was important inside their own lives, both inside and outside of work. So by sharing so honestly, Matt took the first steps to really unlocking his team's potential. And I think this is a lesson that I think a lot of leaders can take. Next up, I'm going to talk a little bit about Netflix. So earlier, Debbie mentioned that vision and values are a huge driver of employee engagement. And I wanted to share a story on how Netflix brings their values alive and uses them to reinforce the right types of behavior. So in August 2009, the Netflix founder and CEO, Reed Hastings, published a 124-page slide deck entitled Netflix Culture, Freedom, and Responsibility. This quickly became a huge viral hit and set the tone for many Silicon Valley startups. So this culture book is shared on Netflix's career page. So if you're to visit their website, you could go ahead and look at it in detail. What the heck is inside of a culture book? So Netflix uses it to attract the right type of candidates and push the wrong type of candidates away. If I was to crack open that core values book, you'd see these are a couple of slides from inside of it, and they say, at Netflix, we particularly value the following 9 behaviors and skills in our colleagues, meaning we hire and promote people who demonstrate these 9 values. Just one of the 9 includes courage, and the reason I included it is it's just like a very simple value, and it's something that I aspire to myself. And how do they define courage? It's you say what you think, even if it's controversial. You make tough decisions without agonizing. You take smart risks, and you question actions inconsistent with our values. So I just think it's so simple and poignant, and it's even better that they hire, fire, and promote based upon these values. I think that's a pretty admirable quality. For a lot of organizations, their core values might just be a sticker on the reception of their lobby. So, as I mentioned, a culture book is a powerful way to attract the types of candidates that you want and repel the wrong people. So at Netflix, they're a team, not a family. We're like a pro sports team, not a kids recreational team. Netflix leaders hire, develop, and cut smartly so we have stars in every position. And they publicly display this. They have something called the Keeper test to use to figure out whether you have the right people or wrong people on your team. And it is as follows. A manager should be able to ask themselves, which of my people, if they told me they're leaving for a similar job at a peer company, would I fight hard to keep at Netflix? And again, I'd invite you guys to ask, for all the leaders on the call today, I'd invite you to ask this question about your own team. It's a very good way to decide, to quickly define who's your A players, who the B players are, and maybe who the C players are. So some people might ask, does anyone care about culture? Does anyone care about a culture book? If you were to visit the Netflix culture book, you'd see that it's being viewed over 15 million times. So not only, this has become, as I mentioned earlier, it's become a viral hit online, but also it's been a magnet that pulls people and pushes people away from the organization. It's a powerful book. Also very admirable at Netflix that their values are alive throughout the employee experience or the employee life cycle. So the values are used as a part of the hiring process, as a part of reviews, compensation review, in exit interviews, and in promotion. Now, one quick comment. I love culture handbooks, and for everybody who's attending the call today, we'll send out a copy of this presentation, and if you want, I included 3 of my favorite culture books along with links to those slides. So lastly, I want to talk about a company called 1-800-GOT-JUNK, and they're doing just a phenomenal job with their rewards and recognition. So up on screen, you'll see a photo of a bunch of people in suits and ties looking awfully pumped. This is the daily huddle at 1-800-GOT-JUNK. They're a phenomenal company. They're in the business of moving junk, but they're doing well over $500 million in revenue now, and they're all across North America. Every day, they do a daily huddle, which is approximately 7 minutes long, and they get approximately 400 people together for this very short meeting. You'll see all the people in this one room. I've been to this meeting. These are the people from the Vancouver office. On screen, you'll see a little TV with a bunch more people. Those are from the Toronto office. And every day, they take a few minutes out to recognize one another for living core values. They share their KPIs, and they discuss any key hurdles that might be stopping them from achieving the success that they want that day and that week. So to keep recognition alive and to be recognizing for core values on a daily basis, it's amazing. And if you attend this meeting, the energy will blow your socks off. I'd encourage you to Google 1-800-GOT-JUNK on YouTube. You can actually watch this. They've recorded a bunch of them and just share them publicly. It's an amazing meeting. So that's an illustration of phenomenal recognition taking place on a daily basis around core values. What I think is even cooler is they have the best rewards program I've ever seen called the 101 Life Goals program. So how does this work? 1-800-GOT-JUNK helps with employees achieve both small and big life goals. And at 1-800-GOT-JUNK, I've seen people do everything from learning a new skill like photography all the way to traveling to another country to help build a school. So up on screen, you'll see a couple photos. This is Jerry. He flew to Tanzania to help build a school so the local kids could learn how to read. He ended up bringing his daughter, and that project was partially funded by 1-800-GOT-JUNK. So the interesting thing about this program is that we all, at most companies, are spending quite a bit of money on water bottles, on Starbucks gift cards. You can take those exact same funds and help people achieve life goals. It doesn't have to be something huge like going to Africa. People often have really small, easily achievable goals, and when you get behind them, you'll discover that they're more loyal, your retention goes to the roof, and employee engagement shoots up. So just to wrap that up, I'd love to share one quick quote which says, "A 10-year study of the world's 50 best businesses, including Apple, concludes that those who centered their business on a culture of improving people's lives had a growth rate triple that of competitors in the same category." I think this quote kind of speaks for itself, and at this point, I think we'd love to switch to takeaways. So what did we discuss today? First, it's critical to do an engagement survey. Debbie did an amazing job describing the 7 most common survey mistakes. We really wanted you to understand the 12 employee engagement drivers, and we did a bit of a deeper dive into about 6 of those. I'd encourage you not to reinvent the wheel. I have a good friend who says that it's all about R&D, which stands for rip off and duplicate, meaning that you should look to leaders and borrow their best ideas. So from TELUS, we learned about the importance of developing a leadership and learning culture. From Google, we learned how to build a highly effective team. Netflix demonstrated how to bring values to life through a culture book, and 1-800-GOT-JUNK showed us how to recognize and reward your employees on a daily and weekly basis. So let's quickly switch to special offers. We have some awesome stuff for you guys today. First, I love to talk about a project near and dear to my heart. So if you're interested in increasing employee engagement and building a high-performance team, we're going to offer a free demo of the Bucket List Rewards and Recognition platform. This is the platform actually used at 1-800-VET-YOUNG. So I'm just going to put this up on screen for a few seconds. And that question is, would you like a demonstration of the Bucket List Employee Engagement Platform? So if you go ahead and just click yes or no, that would be great. And we'll leave this up on screen for a few seconds. Very good, maybe another 5 to 6 seconds. And we'll close the pull down. Very good. Next up, and this is a very cool offer. It is you get the opportunity to request a free culture benchmark. So what the heck is a free culture benchmark? So 95% of employees say culture is more important than compensation, and we have a bunch of data and insights. So essentially, if you tell us who your company is, and you give us 2 to 3 competitors or companies you admire, we can compare you against those organizations to see how you stack up. We provide you with an overall rating, we compare culture and values, we even give insights around compensation and benefits, work-life balance, so you can see who has the best culture and probably who's getting the best talent. But more importantly, you know exactly what things to fix or improve inside your own organization so that you can become a culture leader. I'm going to pop this up on screen. Would you like a free culture benchmark? Again, we'll just leave this up on screen for a few seconds. So if you want to participate in this, just click yes or no. Very good. I'll close that pull down. And then last but not least, before we switch to questions, is do you need some help? So I've had a chance to know Debbie over the past few months. She's a phenomenally smart young lady with lots of years experience. And if you want help from an expert inside the HR sector and industry, you can request or ask that Debbie follow up with you. So up on screen, I'd encourage you to click yes or no. If I was in your shoes, I would definitely be clicking on yes right now. She's one of the smartest people I've ever worked with. And she can help you with employee engagement surveys, with leadership and employee training, or questions around team effectiveness and assessment. Excellent. We'll leave it up there for just a few more seconds. Excellent. I'm going to go ahead and close that pull down. Wicked. And with that, why don't we switch to Q&A? So there is a panel inside your window that should allow you guys to submit questions if you have any. And I'm going to give a few seconds for you to go ahead and just type those in there. Oh, and I see the first question pop up. And it is, when it comes to employee engagement, where should I start? Maybe, Debbie, if you wanted to field that one, if you're okay.
Okay, so I think that the best place to start is actually to just have a conversation around what are some of the signs and symptoms that you are recognizing or seeing in your team or in your work environment. And then once we identify what those things are, it's putting together an employee engagement survey. One of the reasons why I started doing this as part of my business is because when I worked in HR, there really weren't cost-effective ways to do engagement surveys. I think one company we used ended up coming out of the United States. It cost us over $10,000. And I just thought, this is ridiculous. If this is going to be part of an annual checkup for a business, we have to do it in a cost-effective way. So I've been able to develop a tool to do that for you. And I'd be happy to follow up with you just to share more with you about that.
Excellent. And I guess kind of in line with that one, somebody is asking, are there any tools that you would recommend when it comes to conducting an employee survey or an employee engagement survey?
Okay, that's another really good question. So for me, to be honest, I actually just use SurveyMonkey. But I do want to encourage you to be cautious about internally doing your own survey. You get so many issues and concerns from employees around, I don't want them to see my response. If you guys do internal SurveyMonkey, then people can see individual responses, and it'll really decrease the amount of authenticity in the surveys. So having a third party confidentially do that for you, I think is well worth. It's a small investment.
Next up is, what is your opinion of Disney employees programs? So I'll be frank. I don't have enough insight. I think to give a frank or give a good explanation or opinion of that. I think it's a great question. What I can speak to is I actually went to a presentation by a fellow by the name of Lee Cockrell. He was formerly the chief operating officer of all of Disneyland's operations, and so Lee was an employee of Disney, and he spoke to the value of culture, and I was blown away by his presentation. So one thing that really stood out to me is how they brought the core values to life. They actually used the 7 dwarves to illustrate the 7 different values inside the organization, and they're held very near and dear to the heart of Disney. But again, in all frankness, other than seeing that presentation and being just super impressed by Lee and how he positioned Disney, I can't comment intelligently on that. Next question is, how do you determine vision and deal with ambiguity in innovating, even with the engagement surveys?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So I guess the number one piece is, does a vision exist for the company? So when we actually do the surveys, that's one of the questions we ask is, do you believe in the vision of this organization? Are you proud to work for this company? So if a company doesn't have a vision and that comes up in the survey in terms of response, then that's really a first place to start, is we need to clearly create the vision for this organization. Otherwise, people aren't going to buy in and be motivated or committed.
Awesome. And I'll make one addition to that. We're currently, in one of my software companies, we're deploying something called EOS or Traction. So there's a book called Traction. And EOS stands for Entrepreneur's Operating System, and they have a bunch of content on how to create a great vision and how to simply communicate it in what they call a 2-page business plan. That's something I've personally had experience with, and we just rolled it out with one of our companies, and the team's over the moon. Everybody's aligned around the vision and the values, and everybody can actually recite the values and vision back, the entire company, as far as I understand. So just one tool you might want to check out. So how do you get employee buy-in for engagement when a supervisor isn't engaged? That's a great question.
One of the things that we look at when we do engagement surveys is we actually get feedback on supervisors. So you'll end up getting a report by department which has a number of questions related to the specific supervisor. And to be honest, often what ends up coming out of that is that there's some need for some difficult conversations and some coaching for that supervisor to actually have the discussion around their lack of engagement, their need for engagement, how it's affecting the team. And the survey often becomes a great tool for you to be able to have that conversation with some data to back it up. It's factual. It's not just this is what we think. It's now we have hard facts to actually back up the fact that this is causing an issue for the team. So lots of coaching, lots of difficult conversations.
Yeah, and this is something I've heard Debbie and a few others say, and something I've personally witnessed myself, is that employees will often join a company because the culture looks amazing, the interviews are phenomenal, but they leave because they have a bad manager. So people join the company, but they'll leave because of a bad manager. So if a manager is disengaged, you want to pounce on that. That's a huge leadership opportunity for coaching up or coaching out, as I say. You could free up somebody's future, and there is no harm in that.
Yeah, you cannot afford to have a disengaged supervisor. They have an 80% impact on employee engagement, right?
Excellent. So I think we'll wrap it up there. Jackie, Melissa, Stella, thank you so much for the questions. And Jackie, thank you so much for the feedback. I'm glad you enjoyed the presentation. You rule as well. We'll be following up and sending out a copy of the presentation, and we'll be following up with everybody who made requests from us. Thank you so much for your time today, and I hope everybody has a wonderful Wednesday. Thanks very much, everybody.
And feel free to follow up with us if you have any other questions, right?
Absolutely.
So after today, there was a lot of information, but if you do have a question that comes up in the future, you've got our email up here, you've got our contact info, so feel free to follow up with us.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, everybody.
Have a good day.